My name's Lucilla, but I go by Lucy, so I think I know most of you here. And I'm talking today about my recent trip in May to the US for the whole month. So I'm trying to fit in a month of information into 20 minutes, so let's see how I go. What I just want to say is this trip was fully funded by the Gordon Darling Foundation, and I went specifically for the cellulose acetate and nitrate project, formerly known as the CAN project, which I'm working on here at the Maritime Museum. Some of you might have heard about that before. So it was a trip for work supported by work but funded externally. And I want to say that the application was really simple, and I really encourage everyone to apply for these sorts of grants. And the only thing that it really required was institutional support. And I kind of constructed my dream project proposal not fully expecting anything to come of it, but it was approved, so I got to go for my dream trip. And I think it's something to do with the reason that I used the words flammable and hazardous to humans and collections. It really made people want to give me some money, so that was great. So here is my trip summarised. Please forgive the lack of geographical accuracy. Thank you. So the plan was to attend the AIC Annual Meeting to present a poster on the CAN project and to visit nearby cities and institutions that have their own substantial cellulose acetate and nitrate collections. And the purpose was to discover US best practice and processes for the identification, storage, handling, digitisation and management of this material, and then bring it back to Australia to share with my institution and other conservators. So, yeah. So I'm going to go through in chronological order and give you my key takeaways, but I'm going to have to skip over some places and some information because, like I said, it was a whole month. So first stop, I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and visited the Photo Conservation Department. They have over 100 fellows at the Met, and that's not just in conservation but across the whole board, but still very impressive. And they also have over 100 conservators, so they don't all know each other, which I find crazy. I spent my time with Nora Kennedy, who's the head of the Photo Conservation Department, and she's been there for 27 years, which is far longer than photo conservation or the photo department existed. So the department and the labs only for dates from 2001, and I got to talk to her about various photographs. Particularly, they had an exhibition on daguerreotypes, and they had a lot of them that didn't have their cases still extant. So they came up with a new system to both store and display them. I'm going to try and do my best to describe it, but I think the images do it better. So they used a mylar sort of sling in a Z shape to hold the daguerreotype, and then they used that to slot into an aluminium frame and had some mount board and glass that sandwiched around it and sealed it with filmoplast. Then for display they had a metal, I don't know what you call it, case that it slid into, and then it stuck out from the wall on a metal prong, and you can see one of the daguerreotypes that were displayed on the far right and left, right. And it looks like it's just floating there. Also, when I talked to them about their collection of acetate and nitrate, they have two substantial collections of negatives, and one was currently rehoused in the freezer with a microenvironment because it didn't have RH control, and one still needed rehousing and cold storage. They also had a really fantastic method of storing their strips, roll strips, where they had this concertina accordion style housing, and either they would, with permission of curators, cut the rolls to certain lengths and fit them in within this accordion housing, or it was already cut. So and this is suitable for cold storage, this housing. Then I went to the Morgan Library. This was more of a fun trip rather than they have acetate and nitrate collections, but Australian Body and Hearn is currently a fellow there, so I got to visit her. They've got a custom-built lab, which they're now discussing years later improvements to with the original architectural firm, so that's quite interesting, that continuation. They also have a permanent microscope station set up, which is quite a luxury, and I like seeing that there. I also visited the National Archives in New York City and the Paley Media Institute, and I'm just going to gloss over that because short on time. I also went to the New York Public Library, which, apart from the Palace Museum, is the hugest laboratory I've ever seen. Part of that is because they were the only ones willing to move out of Manhattan to Queens, the only department willing to, so they pretty much got whatever they asked for and more. They have so much space that now Conservator there just specialises in large items because they do not have many conservators to fill that space. I met 6. Wow. In that space. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So she specialises in huge posters, 3 metres by 2 metres, but also huge collections or quantities of items. So I was with Jessica Keister, who's a photo conservator, and she took me through how they humidify rolls of acetate and nitrate. So it's a way for them to humidify it so they can be re-rolled on a big support with the emulsion side facing out, or they then, after they've humidified it, can cut them into smaller strips for storage. For nitrate, they used glycerin, water, and acetone to limit the amount of moisture, but for acetate they used just water, humidity in a chamber. Also, she took me through the burn test, which I think most of you know about, to identify acetate and nitrate. They don't usually practice that though. What they do is the diphenylamine spot test, which you can do with 3D nitrate objects or 2D. But she showed me a modified version where you get glass microscope slides, and they have a frosted end which is a bit rough. All you do is you grab the negative and rub the side on that rough bit, and that's enough residue apparently, so if you drop the diphenylamine on that spot, it will give you a positive or negative result, which is a really great alternative to actually cutting off a corner and sampling it. Then I travelled to the AIC Annual Meeting with Anne King, who used to work at the Australian Museum, I believe, many years ago. So she's now in the US. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong photo. It was held in a casino, but this is more appropriate to what we were actually doing. The first 2 days were spent on tours. I went to the Northeast Documents Conservation Centre, which has fantastic online resources if you've never seen them. So the NEDSIC, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, was created in 1973 in someone's garage, and now it's 20,000 square feet of lab space, which is pretty impressive. And they call themselves a mobile army surgical hospital. So they have a lot of audiovisual digitisation services, and when they're digitising acetate or nitrate stills, they have the capacity to shoot 500 a day with a 100 megapixel camera, and then they can process 300 a day, which is a huge amount. And one of the things I saw in the lab that I really loved was these finger gloves. I don't know where they got them, but I'm going to find them. Then later that day we went on to historic New England, and they service 37 historic houses across 5 states. So their focus is mainly on preventive conservation. So they showed us their bubble CO2 treatment facility, and so it's not a true anoxic treatment chamber. It's got 4 to 6% oxygen content, and they also have a little baby bubble. It's a little one, probably about this big, that inflates, and they've been running this for 25 years, pretty much constantly doing treatments for themselves and other institutions nearby. And their practice is any new acquisitions undergo a treatment in one or other of the bubbles. They also have, while they've got most of their collections scattered across the historic houses, they have 179,000 feet of storage for their collections. And one really fantastic passive pest control they use is this tool, which is treated with a chrysanthemum insecticide that's apparently used by the military. And they've had some really outstanding results with it after they had an infestation, and they're going to publish about this soon, so keep your eye out. I also went to the Yale British Art Centre, and they're building a really incredible reference collection connected to the Conservation Lab, created by the Conservation Lab, on materials and tools that they use for research and teaching. But also what I really loved is I met their bug lady. So she's a preservation technician there in charge of all environmental monitoring, and she does incredible outreach and engagement programs to empower every staff member. She handed out these jars to every staff member and puts a cute little bug sticker on top so no one's scared of the bugs, and she then knows where these jars come from, so everyone's collecting bugs if they find them. It's not down to just her. She also has an intranet page, and she assigns a bug king or queen for the month, depending on what they've done about the bugs. And what was really interesting was she had this case where one of her pest traps in a room kept getting moved. She asked around and kind of said, please don't move my pest trap, it's in that location for a reason. And eventually security came up to her and said, we'll help, we've got a camera in that area. And they played the footage over, and they actually found was this ginormous cockroach that at night would run out, run around, push the trap, run around again and run out. That month security got designated Bug Emperor. She also has a poster in the AIC, which should be up on the website soon. Then I went to the Yale University Library, and they had this incredible travelling consortium. I can't find the accurate name for it, but I'll look it up for you. And so these are resources they put together on all materials, techniques, tools used for medieval manuscripts, books, bound volumes. It's just incredible, the time spent in putting it together. It is incredible, and they share it with everyone. And then later that day, we went to the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. And amongst all these books that are in this glass sort of cube, very British Library-esque, we got to eat and drink while looking at that, which is kind of not too bad. Then we went on to 3 days of conference after 2 days of tours, and there was an opening general session where everyone attended. And this conference is huge. If you haven't had a chance to attend it, it's over 1,000 conservators. Even if you know someone that's attending, there's no guarantee you'll see them there because it's that big. One of the key themes for the conference was diversity, very similar to what Colin mentioned at ICON. And a really interesting talk was by Fletcher Durant on conservation, and it's not neutral, he's positing. He says we impact on heritages and society, and conservation is all about making choices and allocating scarce resources, expertise and time. So we can create and we also can erase, so we need to be really aware of that. And he also said there's a real lack of diversity in our workforce. He also said something that was very interesting. He said that we hide behind our neutrality, so we don't have to take responsibility to uphold cultural and ethnic diversity. So that really hit. Then there was also a really fantastic talk that here we go. It was from the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, and they really wanted to highlight their Asian art conservation and raise the profile of the studio, and so they decided to do a live conservation treatment. And it's the first time they did this with interpretation, and they couldn't say enough how good having the interpretation included was. And so they included video and social media alongside this. They had a plexiglass barrier to just keep the safety of the works. They had uniforms for the conservation staff, which really clearly designated they were working on the artwork. They had a hashtag, and they involved the security really heavily and empowered them. So they had daily talks to update and find out their concerns. They also had guides with pins saying Art Whisperer that were moving around the space. So it took a bit of the pressure off the conservators having to constantly engage with the public if they were going through a really tricky step in the treatment process, because every step of the treatment process was on display. They also use social media to sort of say, this is the next treatment step, it's happening tomorrow, come in and see. So it encouraged a lot of repeat visitors, which is fantastic. So after the opening general session, there was lots of concurrent talks from the multiple specialisation streams, so you had to start choosing where you'd go. And sometimes there'd be 5 talks on, and the majority of them you'd want to go to, so this is a very abbreviated version. Most of the talks will hopefully go up on the blog, so keep your eye out for those. One of them was on the expansion of cold and cool storage vaults, and the Carter Museum has over 250,000 photographic materials. So one comment they made was every minute counts, every degree that you can bring down is important. So that was a really key takeaway from that. Smithsonian did a survey of their audiovisual materials and used this really great infographic to raise the profile of those collections and to share the information. So it was really interesting to see how you can communicate data. After their AIC Annual Meeting, I went to Rochester, which is a bit of a hotbed of photography. It's where the Eastman Kodak manufacturer was located for a really long time. So the Image Permanence Institute has lots of really incredible online resources, including filmcare.org, which I use every time I'm working on the CAN project, also the Graphics Atlas, and the D3P3 website for digital prints, so I really recommend looking them up. And they're all about building a teaching collection, and they use that for experiments and also what they share on their websites. And a lot of the experiments they do are based on environmental monitoring and controls. And a lot of them are scientists, so they speak a really certain language and their knowledge is astounding. So they're all about outreach and research and helping others. I also went to the George Eastman Museum, and they have 110,000 reels of motion picture film. They have 3 vaults on site at varying conditions, and they have one off-site nitrate vault which holds 24,000 cellulose nitrate reels at a 30% RH. So they've got this specialised vault, and they own the 4 acres around it. the temperature's at 4 degrees. The site meets all the National Fire Protection Agency requirements, which pretty much every institution that has nitrate in their collections has to follow. They have 12 different vaults on this site and an inspection area, and it's 92% full. And they don't separate by condition, and they have a fresh air exchange every 20 minutes, which helps them not having to separate condition. They also rent space at Kodak. I then got a tour, so this is inside the vaults. I then got a tour of the conservation lab, which is the oldest photograph conservation lab in the world, apparently, and they have over 400,000 photographs. They also have a study collection, which they make up from degraded or low-value collection items, and I saw some truly horrific things. And then I went on to Washington, DC, and the Smithsonian Institution Archives. So they store a fifth of their collection on site, and the rest is scattered across multiple locations, including Iron Mountain, which I found out about, which is up in the northeast, and it's a naturally controlled relative humidity and temperature location because it's pretty much built into the mountain, and it's privately owned but services a lot of institutions, and they will transfer items within 24 hours, so even though it's off-site, they can quite quickly service Washington, which is amazing. Then I got a tour of the off-site Smithsonian, and they have this incredible storage facility where they have a pod system. So anytime they need to expand their storage, they just add another pod and an access route, so they're not having to continually develop their building fabric. I'm going to jump through. So this is some of the storage I saw, and they have a very old FTIR, which they showed me put it in action. It used to be portable, but they decided because it's so old not to move it anymore. Also, I got to go to the Library of Congress. They have a really huge lab, and the main takeaway from that is the National Fire Protection Agency does ask for contributions by conservators, but they're very wary about their involvement. Some of the rules in there seem quite arbitrary and quite confusing, so each institution interprets them quite differently. So I got quite conflicting information from each institution. For example, the legal amount to transport nitrate is based on what was required, the weight amount of what was required to show one nitrate film. So they wanted to have a nitrate film viewing. This is the amount weight it was going to be. So it was nothing to do with a safety requirement. It was a practical requirement. And then on my last visit, I went to the National Archives and Records Administration. They had a great colour coding system for their multiple versions, and they've been digitising for a really long time. This is the old machine. This is the 4K machine. So I'm going to probably just leave it there. These are some things that I saw during my trip that I couldn't include in my talk. I'm just going to scan through really quickly while I just say thank you very much to the Gordon Darling Foundation for allowing me to go. It was fully funded by them, and for the support of the Australian National Maritime Museum for letting me go. I wittingly went to the hotbed of photo conservation in the northeast, and it was an incredible experience. So if you have any questions, please feel free at the end to ask them. And I'm going to just scan through these really quickly. I got unprecedented access to storage facilities of a lot of places, and everyone was incredibly generous with their time and knowledge. So something for everyone. Some really interesting housing. Someone who created the Agents of Deterioration playlist on Spotify. And that's me with my poster, so thank you very much.